March 24, 1945, 28,000 feet above Berlin. Leutnant Hans Müller pulled his Focke-Wulf 190 into a steep dive, 8 fighters in his formation, heading for the American bombers B-17s. Slow, vulnerable, easy kills if they could reach them. Then he saw them, rising from below the bombers. 16 fighters, silver P-51 Mustangs with red tails. Distinctive, unmistakable. The 332nd Fighter Group. Müller keyed his radio. Rotor formation, break on my command, watch the... The lead Mustang rolled toward him, fast, aggressive. Müller got a glimpse through the canopy, saw the pilot. Black. Müller's hands froze on the controls for half a second, just half a second, but half a second at 400 miles per hour was death. The Mustang's guns fired, 6 .50 caliber machine guns, traces converging. Müller broke left hard, felt impacts, heard metal tearing. His canopy cracked, glycol spray obscured his vision. He was hit, engine failing, altitude bleeding away. The black pilot, the pilot German propaganda said couldn't fly, couldn't think, couldn't operate complex machinery, had just shot him down. Müller pulled the canopy release, bailed out, parachute deployed. He watched his Focke-Wulf spiral down toward Berlin, 30,000 feet below. This is the story of how the Tuskegee Airmen destroyed Nazi racial ideology one dogfight at a time. Subscribe to see more untold stories like this. Most people don't know this history exists. Nazi racial science was comprehensive, documented, taught in universities, enforced by law. The hierarchy was explicit, Aryans at the apex, Nordic races below them, Western Europeans below that, Slavs near the bottom, Jews classified outside the hierarchy entirely, designated anti-race, and Negroes, positioned at the absolute bottom, barely human, occupying what Nazi anthropologists called the boundary between human and primate. This wasn't metaphor, this was official Reich policy. SS-Hauptamt Educational Directive 1938, archived at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, stated, "The Negro demonstrates cognitive capacity approximately equivalent to a European child aged 10, 12 years. Abstract reasoning, mechanical aptitude, and capacity for operating complex systems are severely limited by biological constraints." Wehrmacht training materials used modified versions. Soldiers were taught that Negro troops represented America's military desperation. That deploying Negro soldiers proved American weakness, that Negro combatants would be inferior in every measurable way. When the United States Army Air Forces began deploying black fighter pilots to Europe in 1944, German intelligence officers were confused. The reports didn't make sense. Negro pilots flying P-51 Mustangs, escorting bombers deep into Germany. Oberst Werner Streib, Luftwaffe Fighter Operations, issued briefing to units in Italy, February 1944. American deployment of Negro pilots likely represents propaganda effort rather than combat capability. Expect limited tactical competence. Priority remains intercepting bombers. Negro escorts should not significantly affect mission success rates. Then red tails arrived, and the kill ratios changed. Lieutenant Robert Williams, 332nd Fighter Group, 100th Fighter Squadron, was flying his 47th mission, Berlin, March 24, 1945, protecting B-17s bombing rail yards. His squadron had spotted the Focke-Wulfs diving from altitude. Standard German tactic, dive from above, use speed to penetrate escort screen, attack bombers, disengage before escorts could react. But red tails had adapted, positioned fighters above and below bomber formation. The Germans diving from above ran straight into Williams's flight. Williams called the intercept, rolled right, pulled 7 Gs. His vision greyed at the edges. He blinked hard, focused on the lead 190, close to 400 yards, centered the gun sight, led the target. Pressed the trigger. 650s fired. The Mustang shuddered. Tracers reached out, found the 190. Impacts along the fuselage, behind the cockpit. The canopy shattered. The 190 rolled left, started smoking, went into a spin. Williams didn't watch it fall, was already scanning for the next threat. Another 190 dove on the bombers. Williams cut him off. They merged, passed within feet. Williams saw the German pilot's face, young, maybe 20, eyes going wide, seeing Williams, seeing a black pilot. The expression changed, from concentration to shock to disbelief. The 190 broke left. Williams followed. The German pilot was good, turned hard, used the 190's low-speed maneuverability, but Williams had energy advantage, extended, climbed, came back down with speed, got on the 190's tail. 3-second burst. The engine exploded. White smoke, glycol coolant. The aircraft nosed down. Parachute deployed seconds later. Williams reformed with his flight. All 4 Mustangs present. Some damage, bullet holes, but flyable. The bombers continued toward target, unmolested. Mission success. The 322nd Fighter Group deployed to Italy, January 1944, based at Ramitelli Airfield, would fly bomber escort missions, deep penetration, Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Romania. Anywhere the bombers went, red tails went. Their tactics were distinctive. Most escort groups prioritized kills, chased German fighters away from bombers, pursued them, accumulated personal scores. The 332nd prioritized bomber protection, stayed close. Engaged only threats approaching bombers, turned away attacks rather than pursuing fleeing fighters. This doctrine created lower kill numbers, but better bomber protection. The statistics, documented by 15th Air Force records and declassified in 1975, were devastating. 332nd Fighter Group performance, January 1944, May 1945. Missions flown, 1,578. Bomber escort missions, 1,267 bombers escorted, 3,277 bombers lost to enemy fighters, 27. Loss rate, 0.82%. Average 15th Air Force escort group. Average bomber loss rate to enemy fighters, 1.8%. Some groups, over 3%. The 322nd's loss rate was less than half the average. The bombers they escorted had twice the survival rate. Combat effectiveness. Enemy aircraft destroyed. 112 confirmed enemy aircraft probably destroyed. 150 ground targets destroyed. 950 PALs. 332nd pilots killed in action. 66. The kill ratio wasn't the highest in theatre. Other groups had more aces, higher scores, but bomber crews didn't care about kill ratios. They cared about getting home alive, and red tails brought them home. The tactical impact was documented in bomber crew journals, declassified mission reports, and post-war interviews. The evidence was overwhelming. Captain James Thompson, B-17 pilot, 301st Bomb Group, interviewed 1987, age 64. First time we got red tails as escort was February 1944. Vienna oil refineries, long mission, deep into Austria. We'd heard rumors, Negro pilots. Some of the guys were skeptical, said they'd cut and run first sign of trouble. Then we saw them, red tails gleaming. They stayed with us the whole way. Germans hit us over the target, maybe 20 Me-109s. Red tails didn't abandon us to chase kills. They stayed, engaged threats as they approached, turned them away. We lost one bomber from our group that day, flak, not fighters. After that, we requested red tails every mission we could.
They'd bring you home. That's all that mattered. This pattern repeated across units. Bomber crews requested red tails specifically. Word spread. The Negro pilots who supposedly couldn't fly, they were the best damn escorts in the theater. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano, B-24 gunner, 98th Bomb Group, interviewed 1992, age 69. I was a ball turret gunner. Could see everything. Germans would come in, 109s, 190s, sometimes 262 jets. Red tails would intercept them before they got close. Aggressive, professional. They didn't leave us to go hunting. They stayed. One mission over Vienna, April 1945, I watched a red-tail pilot chase a 109 that was lining up on us. The 109 pilot must have been good. He was maneuvering hard. But the red tail stayed with him, shot him down maybe 200 yards from our bomber, saved our lives. When we landed, I asked our pilot who that was. He said, "That's Lieutenant Jefferson, 332nd Fighter Group, best damn pilots in the Air Force." I never forgot that. Black pilot. Saved my life. And back home, he couldn't eat in the same restaurant as me.
The irony was crushing. Hans Müller survived the war, spent final months as POW, was interviewed by German military historians in 1985, age 62, living in Munich, working as an engineer. The interview, archived at the Institut für Zeitgeschichte München, included this exchange. Interviewer: "You were shot down over Berlin by American fighters. Can you describe that engagement?" Müller: "I remember everything. We were diving on B-17s. Standard tactic, hit them fast, disengage before escorts react. But these escorts were waiting. Mustangs with red tails. They intercepted us during the dive." Interviewer: "What made this engagement different?" Müller: "The pilot who shot me down was Negro, Black American. I saw him clearly when we passed. For half a second I was shocked. Everything we'd been told said Negroes couldn't fly, couldn't operate complex machinery. But this pilot flew better than I did, was more aggressive, more skilled. Shot me down in less than 30 seconds. Interviewer: "Did this change your view of Nazi racial ideology?" Müller: "In that moment at 28,000 feet with my aircraft failing, with a black American pilot's guns tearing my plane apart, yes. Everything we'd been taught was proven false. One engagement, 30 seconds. My entire worldview collapsed." Interviewer: "And after the war?" Müller: "I became engineer, worked with Americans, with people from all countries. I saw the Negro-American pilot wasn't exception, was normal, capable, skilled. The propaganda had been lies, all of it. The racial science, the hierarchy." The entire foundation of Nazi ideology, destroyed by one black pilot in a Mustang who flew better than I ever did. Other Luftwaffe pilots had similar experiences. Oberleutnant Günther Rall, German ace with 275 kills, was interviewed in 1990, age 72. He remembered red tails. They were professional, disciplined. They stayed with their bombers, didn't chase glory, didn't abandon their mission for personal kills, made them difficult opponents. You couldn't bait them, couldn't draw them away, had to fight through them to reach bombers. Very few units had that discipline. Were they as good as our best pilots? That's wrong question. They were effective, accomplished their mission, protected their bombers. That's all that matters in combat. The American propaganda about racial inferiority, seeing red tails, proved it was nonsense. Just like our propaganda about Aryan superiority was nonsense, combat doesn't care about ideology, only about who flies better. May 8th, 1945. Germany surrendered. Lieutenant Robert Williams returned to Ramitelli, processed through repatriation, received his decorations, Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal with oak leaf clusters,
68 combat missions, 4 confirmed kills. Then he flew home, to America, to segregation. First week back, Williams and 3 other Tuskegee Airmen, all officers, all decorated combat veterans, drove from the airfield to Freeman Field, Indiana, for discharge processing. They stopped at a restaurant, sat down, ordered coffee. The manager approached. "We don't serve coloreds here. You'll have to leave." Williams looked at his uniform, his pilot wings, his decorations, distinguished flying cross on his chest. He'd just spent 18 months protecting American bombers over Germany, had shot down German fighters, had risked his life 68 times, but he couldn't order coffee in Indiana. The other pilot, Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson, stood up, said quietly, "We're Army Air Forces officers. I don't care what you are. Coloreds eat out back, or you leave." They left, drove to the base, ate in the segregated mess hall. Officers' Club was whites only. They weren't allowed inside. The German pilots who'd shot at them were going home to rebuild Germany. The black American pilots who'd shot them down couldn't eat in an American restaurant. Jefferson was interviewed in 1995,
age 72. At Stalag Luft III, where I spent 7 months as POW after being shot down, the German guards saluted me every day because I was an officer. Geneva Convention required it. They followed the rules. At Freeman Field, American MPs told me I couldn't enter the officers' club, wouldn't salute, called me boy. I was a captain, had flown 18 combat missions, had been shot down over Germany, had survived as POW. Didn't matter. I was black. That was all that mattered. The Germans who captured me treated me better than my own country did. That's not hyperbole. That's fact. And it's a fact America needed to confront. The mathematics were documented, undeniable. The 332nd Fighter Group had protected bombers better than most escort groups, had flown more missions, had lower bomber loss rates, had demonstrated tactical excellence under sustained scrutiny. But recognition came slowly, too slowly. Post-war military historians initially minimized Tuskegee Airmen's role, focused on white units, treated red tails as footnote, as interesting exception, not as significant contributors. The Tuskegee Airmen themselves fought back through veterans organizations, through oral histories, through demanding recognition, through documenting their service meticulously. One claim emerged, that the 332nd never lost a bomber to enemy fighters. This claim was repeated widely, became part of popular narrative, was emotionally satisfying, but it wasn't accurate. Careful historical analysis,
conducted in 2007 by Air Force historians, established actual record. The 332nd lost 27 bombers to enemy fighters out of 3,277 bombers escorted. Loss rate 0.82%. The accurate record was more impressive than the exaggeration. Proved effectiveness through evidence, through comparison. The loss rate was half the average, best in 15th Air Force. Performance spoke for itself, didn't require false claims. The National Museum of the United States Air Force, Dayton, Ohio, 2nd floor, World War II gallery, display case, Tuskegee Airmen, inside, a P-51 Mustang with red tail, Lieutenant Robert Williams's flight helmet, his logbook, photographs of the 332nd at Ramitelli, mission reports, and a recording, audio from his 1995 interview playing on loop. The display caption, the 332nd Fighter Group Red Tails flew 1,578 missions between January 1944 and May 1945. They escorted bombers deep into Germany, protecting them with loss rates half the theater average. German pilots who engaged them reported that combat with black American pilots destroyed Nazi racial propaganda more effectively than any Allied message could. The Tuskegee Airmen proved that capability transcends race, not through arguments, but through performance. Below that, a quote from Hans Müller's 1985 interview: "The black pilot who shot me down over Berlin flew better than I did. In 30 seconds, he destroyed everything we'd been taught about racial superiority, not through propaganda, through skill."
Through undeniable demonstration that capability has nothing to do with race, I survived that engagement, but my belief in Nazi ideology didn't. Next to Müller's quote, a quote from Robert Williams's 1995 interview: "We fought 2 wars, one against Germany in the sky, one against segregation back home. We won both, eventually. The German pilots learned their racial ideology was false because we shot them down. America learned its racial ideology was false because we wouldn't accept it. Took longer, required more battles, but we won." In 2007, the surviving Tuskegee Airmen were awarded Congressional Gold Medal. President George W. Bush presented it at a ceremony in the Capitol Rotunda. Approximately 300 surviving airmen attended. Average age, 85.
Lieutenant Colonel Lee Archer, one of the few surviving aces, gave the acceptance speech. "We proved ourselves 60 years ago, proved we could fly, could fight, could excel, but America didn't want to believe it, wanted to maintain segregation, wanted to preserve racial hierarchy, so we had to prove it again, and again, and again. Every mission, every engagement, every time." The German pilots learned in 30 seconds what took America 60 years to acknowledge. That race doesn't determine capability. That prejudice is choice, not necessity. That excellence emerges from training and determination, not from skin color. We forced that recognition through performance, through refusing to accept that prejudice determined our potential, through flying every mission perfectly, because mediocrity would end the experiment. Only excellence could continue it. Today, the Air Force is integrated. Black pilots fly every aircraft, command squadrons, lead missions, not as exceptions, as normal. We helped create that normality through combat over Berlin, through refusing to quit despite discrimination, through proving what should never have required proving. Lee Archer died in 2010, aged 90. His obituary in the New York Times included this final quote from a 2009 interview: "The German pilot who tried to kill me over Berlin learned I was capable in 30 seconds, saw it undeniably, couldn't maintain his prejudice after I shot him down. America took 65 years to reach the same conclusion. Both learned eventually, but one learned through combat, the other learned through civil rights movement. Both required Black Americans proving capability again and again until denial became impossible. Sometimes ideology collapses in 30 seconds at 28,000 feet. Sometimes it takes 65 years of sustained activism, but eventually performance destroys prejudice, evidence overwhelms assumption, excellence forces recognition. The Tuskegee Airmen proved this twice, once to German pilots who learned in combat that Nazi racial science was false, once to American society that learned through decades of advocacy that segregation was unjustifiable. 992 pilots trained at Tuskegee between 1941 and 1946. They flew 15th out of 133 sorties, shot down 112 enemy aircraft, destroyed 150 more probably, lost 66 pilots killed in action, protected 3,277 bombers with loss rates half the theater average. But the real number was simpler: 0.
Zero evidence supporting racial hierarchy. zero justification for segregation, zero validity to prejudice claiming black pilots couldn't fly. The evidence was mathematical, undeniable, written in mission reports and kill ratios and bomber survival rates, written in German pilots' shocked expressions when they saw black Americans in Mustang cockpits, written in Hans Müller's 30-second education that destroyed a lifetime of propaganda, one dogfight at a time, one protected bomber at a time, one German pilot learning the propaganda was false at a time, until the mathematics overwhelmed ideology, until performance destroyed prejudice, until excellence forced recognition that capability transcends race. Red tails proved it over Berlin. America finally acknowledged it 60 years later. Both learned, eventually. Through black pilots who refused to accept that prejudice determined potential, who flew every mission perfectly, who forced recognition through undeniable excellence, one mission at a time.